Research and Development Office in Brussels. My name is Ewa Kocińska-Lange, and I have a pleasure to run an office with my team, and Maciej, Karolina are there. 3 other persons are not at the moment with us, but we are quite active here. One of our events is, as you already know, Brussels Talks, which we organize for quite some time already with very important people. And we talk about Horizon Europe related topics in general about research and innovation. And today we have the pleasure to have with us here Mr. Marc Lemaître, who is the new Director General for Research and Innovation. And I think we are all very, very curious about what he has to say to us. Thanks again to all of you registered for questions you sent already before. We also prepared some questions, and also, of course, you are all encouraged, and both on participants in the room and also participants online, to still ask the questions now. I'm 100% sure that we don't have time to answer all those questions, but we will try to at least touch some key topics within this 1 hour that we have. And for the participants online, just a small remark: if you have any kind of technical issues, just write in the chat. And also, as I mentioned already before, place your questions there, and we will manage the chat in the meantime. And I will now sit down, and I hope everybody will still be able to hear me, both online and here in the room. So as I said, long list of questions, and thank you once again for agreeing to join us here and to answer some of them. Well, the scenario is like a bit of a longer intervention that you can have now in the beginning of the event, and then we will go directly to questions and answers. And to start, I think we can ask the very general but still important question for the moment: what are the lessons learned from the first years of Horizon Europe, also as it comes to global research and strategic autonomy that we have here at the table at the moment?
Thank you very much, Eva. A very good afternoon to everyone here in this meeting room and also online. It's a great pleasure for me. I did not venture too much into the open during my first months in this function of Director General for Research and Innovation, because I wanted to learn the basics, and I needed to learn the basics because not only, as some of you might know, was I in a very different field before the one of cohesion policy, though there are links, but also because I had never been intimate with the world of research. I did not spend that much time at university myself. I would want to start, and I will share with you today what are very young reflections, indeed reflections which emerged progressively over the past 4 months, discovering where we were under Horizon Europe and still under Horizon 2020. In fact, it's not only cohesion policy that takes time to produce results. And what I see as the big emerging dominant questions in the field of research and innovation for the EU and for its member states. I'd like to start with a quote of Saint-Exupéry, which I like very much. You know, this French aviator, finished tragically. He said something about the notion of the future. And basically he said that the future is not a matter of predicting it, but of making it possible. And I really think that today we are in times where we need to focus in a very resolute way on making the future possible. And that, to me, is also the central task of our research and innovation efforts. It has to be its central task. Why do I say it in this way? Because I really believe that the world is not in a good place today. Humanity is playing with fire, not just heating up the planet, but figuratively playing with its future by not respecting the planet's boundaries and seeing the planet more and more, in fact, push back against our actions. Secondly, we are also at a point where we see an incredible acceleration of technological developments and of possibilities. Think now of this burst out into the open of generative AI systems and how they are being picked up broadly much faster than policymakers can make up their mind about them and whether they should be regulated or not. We have seen now suddenly this issue coming to the fore at the highest level in G7 meetings, in bilateral discussions between the EU and the US and so on. So what is clear there again is that we are on the eve of enormous possibilities, no doubt. For instance, with artificial intelligence, think of what artificial intelligence can do much better than humans can in the field of research. We already have applications which allow to really reduce by factors of 1,000 or 1 million even the time it takes to determine, especially in life sciences, the properties of this or that protein, or you name it. But beyond that, no doubt, artificial intelligence could also help us tear down the walls between different disciplines, scientific disciplines. Again, humans are not that good in being in seeing the whole landscape. And obviously not, because as knowledge increases, it's not easy for a human being in one lifetime to get to the bottom of the knowledge that exists. So there is this prospect of a world in fast accelerating change mode. And this then also begs the question for Europe, what is our place in that world? Will we find our place? Will we be competitive? Will we have the required autonomy? You know the term, open strategic autonomy, and more we're talking about sovereignty and so on and so forth. So I think that when reflecting on research and innovation, we will have to factor in all these different dimensions of sustainability, of accelerating technologies, and of securing the place of Europe in this world. So, in terms of now at European level, the structuring instruments, we have today Horizon Europe, and Horizon Europe, after a few years, yes, already has to reflect on its priorities for the latter years of the program, which will be in 25 to 27 under the so-called new strategic plan. And then not much further around the corner, we will have, as Commission, to produce by mid-2025, more or less a new proposal for the future framework program which would be the one starting in 2028. So what have we done until now in order to gather evidence, gather opinions as well on how these different fundamental pieces should be shaped up? The first thing we did, and I do hope that most of you are aware of this, is to do the widest consultation we ever did, both on the past, on the present, and on the future. Well, it's both threefold, past, present, and future. So on Horizon 2020, on the strategic plan 25-27, and on the future framework program, which aficionados called FP10. We got a very high, I would say, level of response with more than 2,800 replies. A bit more, a bit less, depending on the past, the present, or the future. The present, in fact, had the most replies, interestingly, and also as part of that, we received more than 260 full-fledged position papers. We went also for our own extensive analysis, which we published last month. We are on the eve of putting forward an analysis on missions and partnerships. So that should be out possibly in 2 weeks' time. And then we will be finalizing the ex-post evaluation of Horizon 2020 by the end of this year, and the Horizon Europe interim evaluation by the end of 2024, so certainly well before we make proposals on the future framework program. Now, what can we say of what we have evidenced until now? First, through the consultation, and second, through our extensive analysis. When it comes to the consultation, the biggest challenges identified are very close to what I mentioned, with a strong focus on sustainability, in fact. So it was about climate change, energy supply, loss of biodiversity, and next to that also it was about healthcare and aging, a bit less about digital. And there was also a strong call when it comes to the next strategic plan for a serious simplification of that plan as compared to the present one. Regarding our extensive analysis, which was as much about looking at the global R&I scene and how Europe was faring compared to competitors, it will not surprise anyone that we came to the conclusion that while Europe had done some progress over the past years in terms of research and innovation performance, the gap between Europe and the US was widening, meaning the US was gaining ground, being already ahead of us, and China was basically catching up with us and coming to be overall at a par with us. Where especially are we losing ground? It is on digital technologies. Think of AI. Think also of quantum, even though there I think we do have something stirring in Europe as well. More positively, on green technologies, there we are clearly in a leadership position, and we have, I think, the prospect of remaining in the leadership position if we get our act together, thanks to a regulatory framework giving a clear prospect also for private investors, which no other region of the world has today. And I think very objectively, I believe that this is a true competitive advantage which Europe has today. And then, last but not least, there is also the admitting that Europe is still really not good enough in the uptake of R&I results and its diffusion and transformation into economic value. So from this, I think it is fair to say that Europe does need to raise its game and raise its game very fast if it wants to achieve its different ambitions. We will not be sovereign or sufficiently autonomous strategically on the different key technologies of the future if we are not right there at the front of the pack. So we have, I think, a lot to reflect upon. We have some time, certainly for shaping the next framework program, but we have quite a bit which should focus our minds. I would want to draw your attention to one piece of the proposals which the Commission made last week and which I think were quite visible also in the press on the revision of the multi-annual financial framework. The dominant dimension of that is Ukraine and the commitment to contributing to the reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. A second pillar was also very visible on beefing up our means to manage migration better. But there was also a third pillar called STEP, Strategic Technologies for Europe Platform, which is a terribly bureaucratic name, I would say, which was about 1 year ago called for by President von der Leyen in her last State of the Union speech, in much simpler terms, namely a sovereignty fund for Europe. And so these strategic technologies, which we now have in this STEP title, we will try to support in different ways. Arguably, the most daring one being through the European Innovation Council, which I hope you know about, and which is this relatively more recent part of the research framework program, which was added to Horizon Europe through more or less 10 billion of funding, and which is meant to support, at least until now, startups through grants of up to 2.5 million euros, but also equity investment up to 15 million euros. And more or less as I speak, in fact, we have now a prime example of what this instrument can produce, because we will most probably be investing in a young company which is dealing with quantum computing, with the maximum allowed 15 million euros as part of an overall investment round of more or less 100 million euros, the rest being private venture capital from Europe. So with STEP, we will want to go one step further with the EIC and within Horizon Europe by also making it possible to go for bigger ticket investments, more than 15 million euros, for follow-on investments or for, you can call it, scale-up activities of companies which have really picked up steam. And there we will be able to finance up to 50 million euros in individual companies, being then part of investment rounds of several hundreds of millions of euros. And this, in a focused way, as those strategic technologies suggest. So it would be in deep tech and digital. It would be in biotech, including everything related to the health sector, and it would be in green tech. So I wanted to mention that so that this would not have been overall overload. By now, you might be frustrated that I haven't mentioned widening. This is certainly not a topic I would forget. My very deep belief is that as part of our ambitions for Europe, we definitely need to do better in having our research and innovation capacities fire on all their cylinders. And today we are not there. And I think that we should reflect, certainly as part of the process towards the next framework program, we should reflect on whether the instruments that have been put in place under Horizon 2020 and beefed up financially, at least under Horizon Europe, are really up to making the difference there, up to really spreading excellence widely, or whether we are missing something here and we don't have all the instruments we need to perform better. I was too long, I think, and we should now definitely turn to questions.
Yes, thanks a lot for this introductory speech. Indeed, you touched upon all the areas that we, I think, want to follow up with questions. And I hope you're ready as well. I have some questions online that I see. I was managing them a bit before. And let me maybe start with some budget-related things you already mentioned, because we've also received quite some questions before the event, as I said, and I think that recent news we have are also a bit going into that direction. Of course, with this announcement of the update of MFF and STEP, we see that there is at least a hope, let's say, for research being noticed widely, but there is a common concern, I think, that research are not funded in enough way, and the yearly budget of the program is also a bit always a result of some fight for it. So in the longer perspective, should we worry about the potential FP10 having more money or less money for research? And there are also quite some follow-up questions as it comes to that, and maybe I will pick one that it's going into that direction a bit, because you also mentioned a lot of things that are related with challenges of the industry and those kind of investments that we are also putting in the EIC, for example. But there is a voice here that it's actually also saying that maybe we should think as well about fundamental research and investing a bit more into them in comparison to what we have now, since as the participant is saying here, sometimes everything starts with them.
Thanks very much to you, Eva, and to Dan. Let me start with that latter bit before I forget it. Fundamental research. What we have now with Horizon Europe is quite a comprehensive coverage of what you could call the research and innovation pipeline, starting indeed with fundamental research, and probably the best example for that is the European Research Council, going over to public-private partnerships, for instance, joint undertakings, and having also the closer to market innovation part with the startup scene, and now hopefully also the scale-up efforts. I do think personally that it is absolutely essential to cover that whole ground. And it is also essential to cover this newest bit I have described. Because what is happening right now in Europe is that once we have helped startups, and once they have grown even more promising, more often than not, they are bought up by venture capital from the US or from Israel or from China. This is what is happening. And as these are very often companies in very strategic sectors, indeed, we should be worried about that. But I agree with Dan that everything starts with fundamental research. So we do need to have a sufficient funding of that effort, let's call it blue sky research, without necessarily any clear objective. So that part, no doubt, we need to take sufficient care of. Taking a step back and looking more generally at the intrinsic financing needs. Europe today is at a level of spending on R&I which is insufficient. It's at about 2.2%, and this rate has only been going up very, very marginally over the past 20 years, basically from more or less 2% to 2.2% now. If we compare internationally, you have South Korea at 4.6%, you have the US at around 3.5, 3.6. So clearly, we are not where we should be if we want to keep up with that kind of competition. And this has been recently recognized again by the European Council, which recalled our aim to reach 3% of GDP at least. So I would think that in terms of recognizing Europe's needs, that we are lucid and quite clear-eyed about what needs to be done. How far this will bring us in the next MFF negotiations and so on, let's see. But I think that at least the arguments are extremely strong to raise also our collective game, because European funded research, research funded at European level represents some 10% of all the public spending which goes on research. The public part is one thing, but what we also need to realize is that, in fact, Europe is not doing so badly when it comes to public funding. It is on the private side, what private companies spend on research and innovation, that there are the biggest gaps with the US, with South Korea, for instance. And clearly we need also to try to change things there. When it comes to the annual ups and downs of the budgetary procedure, I really don't think we should be worrying. Horizon Europe as a program is the best funded ever by far. It has not been put into question by anything, not even by the CHIPS Act, and the fact that there would be perhaps somewhat lower payment levels until now is related to the fact that it started relatively slowly and late, but this will be going up very fast soon. So that is not, I think, the proper indicator. The proper indicator is that still we have as much money as was decided initially, that now with that step proposal, we are asking for 500 million euros more in terms of totally fresh money. That next to that, we are proposing 1.2 billion more through recycling of decommitments. And there is 800 million of reshuffling within Horizon Europe, going not from fundamental research, but from the second pillar to the EIC. And 800 million for the second pillar, honestly, is really not a big deal. So overall, that step proposal, in fact, calls for 1.7 billion more for Horizon Europe. So I think that this should be seen as some very positive and promising message for research at European level in the coming years. I would add to that by now some member states are looking at transferring some of their cohesion funding to Horizon Europe as well. We by now have 2 member states intending that. It's Malta and Lithuania, and let's see if that inspires others.
Okay. Yeah, the last thing is quite challenging indeed, but there's an option for that for sure. Okay, I will now open the floor, and yes, and please speak up because we have to make sure that our online participants are also following the questions. It should work, but just yes, Massimo, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Massimo Busori. I'm the director of the Norwegian University of Science and Technology office in Brussels. Thank you very much for the very interesting introduction about the status and so on. I would like to challenge you on another side of the moon, which I think is very linked to your past, which is the structural funds. For years, the Commission have somehow tried to create the necessary collaboration between research and innovation funds, but also the structural funds to be invested in research and innovation activities. Can we think that through your presence in the DG Research, this is going to be simplified and improved in the future?
Well, it depends on what you mean by simplified and improved. I think that one needs to recognize and, in fact, endorse the fact that different policies follow different purposes to start with. And the logic of cohesion policy is not the logic of research policy. in order to be successful, I, for one, have no doubt that cohesion policy needs to focus a lot, especially on innovation. I have always been talking about instilling the innovation mindset, especially in less developed regions in Europe, where it is not that present, and still today. So certainly there are, let's say, there is some convergence in some objectives, but this is not an identical agenda between the two policies. So to me, what is essential is to draw up the right starting point for each policy and its instruments. So if you take cohesion policy, I did my part and my best to ensure that the share of spending going to innovation as part of cohesion policy would be the highest possible, and in fact everywhere in Europe, not just in the more developed regions, but also in the less developed regions. And as always, the proposal of the Commission was of a higher ambition there than it ended up in the end. I think, honestly, that in cohesion policy, we are seeing some positive change, notably through the conditionality linked to smart specialization strategies. And there again, we should, I think, really stay the course. It is still a young approach. I mean, it's around 10 years old, de facto. And administrative cultures and so on need time to absorb this, to embrace this. But the trend, I would say, is positive also in the less developed regions. And this is what now we would like to build on, both through some cohesion means and through some Horizon Europe means, by the so-called regional innovation valleys approach, where we want to stimulate the partnering up of regions which have similar smart specialization goals, and that by linking up more developed regions and less developed ones. So in that we see that yes, there are these points of convergence between the two, which then we try to exploit. But what I really think is that we need to start from a sound design of instruments under cohesion policy to do what they need to do for cohesion, which will include innovation, and what needs to happen under Horizon Europe. And there, I already said it, to me, there's quite a question mark on what would be required to make a bigger difference on widening efforts in the future, and what kind of instruments we would need for that. The transfer of funds, the combination of funding, it can make sense for some individual projects, and I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't pursue these efforts that we have done already quite a bit recently, and with some success. But to me, this is not essential in really achieving our goals. It is not about financial engineering. This is not what will ultimately bring us further. So I wouldn't want us to be blinded by this. the more fundamental question is really how to raise the research and innovation capacity in all corners of Europe.
Thank you. Any other questions from the room? Yes, please.
Thomas Brent from Science Business. I just wanted to.
Can you speak up?
Sorry, far away.
Yeah, well, you can come closer.
Yeah.
Solves all the problems.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for the questions. I just had a question about some changes, recent leadership changes at DG RTD. So obviously we had former commissioner.
You're talking about me?
No. Well, also you, yeah, actually that's thrown in there as well. We have former Commissioner Gabriel who's left to go back to Bulgaria. And now there's stories about Vice President Vestager who might move on to the DIB. So I was just wondering how these changes have affected your work at a very crucial time when we have the interim evaluation, we are planning for FP10. How do these things make that harder, or how has that impacted?
Well, as a newcomer, I was on a steep learning curve, and part of it, of course, is to get to know your colleagues and to get to know your authorities. And that requires some investment, indeed, time-wise, to also develop the right work routines with them. So from that point of view, clearly, when your political authority changes, as it did from Commissioner Gabriel to Executive Vice President Vestager, well, you need to start afresh in a way to build up the right working relations. But rest assured that at all times, and I must say that the Commission is a well-oiled machine. At all times, I benefited from the appropriate and immediate steer when needed for bringing forward files. We didn't drop the ball, I think. We continued according to foreseen timelines. If I can give now that example of the upcoming communication on missions and partnerships, we were at a stage of intensive internal discussions in the Commission when that change happened, and Executive Vice President Vestager ensured that the appropriate political steer would be provided at the right minute, and this is why now we are on the home stretch on that, with expected adoption on the same day, i.e., normally 4th of July. So I did not find it disruptive, except of course that it required to work a few more hours, perhaps, to make sure that all the information necessary for decision making was available. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but we will slightly move for a while to our online participants. There is a question that is going to quite an important a part of Horizon Europe, I would say as well, but it's also referring to this document you're just mentioning about missions and partnerships. How does the Commission intend to involve public players and authorities from Europe's regions a bit more even into the reflection of the future of the framework program? Indeed, Horizon Europe is, I think, one of the most programs that it's going into research on the regional level, and a lot of calls, like namely missions directed to the regions themselves, and also now you mentioned regional innovation valleys, so it's far more that used to be in previous framework programs, but Are there any other initiatives planned to involve regions even more?
Well, if I take your question literally, I think that you have rightly pointed to missions as being quite a bit of a game changer in involving public authorities at subnational level to the extent that they wish to. So this indeed is a really novel feature brought in by missions. But I think that we need to also keep in mind proportions here. I mean, missions are, in financial terms, a very modest part of Horizon Europe. The funding allows for, we're talking about 100, 200, 300 million per year of funding per mission. You don't get very far with that, especially if you are talking, for instance, under the cities mission to 100 cities. 100 cities, 100 million. You can easily see how, to what extent one can provide under Horizon Europe funding, at least, support. So clearly, for missions themselves to be ultimately successful, it will require the crowding in of many other funding sources. And we haven't, in all honesty, seen that yet to the extent that we would like it. And let's also keep in mind that missions, you were talking about fundamental research, that missions are, for many of them, quite far away from fundamental research. Yeah. And for some of them, indeed, it is more about deployment than research. You referred to regional innovation valleys. Here again, let's keep in mind the figure. We're talking about 60 million from cohesion policy and 60 million from Horizon Europe. So very modest amounts indeed. So turning to the future from here, in all honesty, and it brings us back to the question of Massimo, I think, we need to see what the fundamental purpose of each policy and each instrument is. And I don't think that the fundamental purpose of the research framework program is to be funding subnational public authorities or should have a fundamentally geographic vision of things. So I would not expect us to develop a strong territorial or local public authorities dimension in the framework program.
Perfect, thank you. So let's go back to the room. Some questions. Someone was first there. I'm not sure if it was Agota. I think it was Agota. Yes.
Only is polite.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Agota David, NRDIU Hungary, and you mentioned the uptake of technologies and that we are not overly successful with that in Europe. And do you think we need a new instrument for this? And do you think EIC could do this for us more efficient way? And do you only understand market uptake there, or also somehow the readiness of the society? Thank you.
The readiness of society. No, I was referring to private sector and private companies. Well, to me, that's possibly the hardest question for the future: how to improve Europe's performance, not only in research, where on many metrics we are still world class, but also in terms of uptake, in terms of innovation, vibrancy of the private sector and their own research and innovation efforts. There again, companies are not investing that much right now. So I think that the answer cannot be one-dimensional. No doubt, there are a lot of things which need to be brought together, including, for instance, skills. Right? We know in Europe we have a lack of skills in very many sectors, and with accelerating change, possibly that labor gap will increase. Well, this is not encouraging companies then to invest in new technologies and in new sectors. So I mentioned this just as an example to say that I don't think public funding can make alone the difference, but certainly public funding can have a catalyst effect, like in the case I mentioned before under the EIC. Indeed, when you have in Europe a clear, let's call it market failure in the capital markets, where because of more risk awareness, more risk aversion, not risk awareness, because of more risk aversion, because of the way our banking sector, our insurance industries, our pension funds, when there are some, etc., are regulated, there is a lack of venture capital, and there is in particular a lack of non-risk averse patient capital, meaning that you are willing, to make a big bet for 7, 8, 10 years before seeing possibly that bet pay off. So in these cases, yes, public money can make a difference, especially I would say if it is deployed at European level. But it's a difficult question, and I think one needs to look quite broadly.
Okay, thank you. We still have a few minutes, and Magda was first, and then Ali. Yeah.
Hi, Magdalena. I work for the Polish Science Contact Agency here in Brussels. I would like to go back to one of your key points from the beginning of the speech, which is the open AI and in general the artificial intelligence and the disruptive technologies that we all see. Does the Commission plan or foresee in the near future to address the challenges to, for example, the evaluation system, the proposals composure, and the administration of the research proposals?
Can I start more broadly? Europe is the first region in the world to have put forward some regulatory proposals for AI. The AI Act, which is now being discussed in trilogues by now, I think, between Council and Parliament. And I think that the rest of the world is indeed looking at us with interest, wondering what we are doing there. I mention this because in this AI Act, in fact, AI in research is excluded. So the AI Act would not be saying anything about the use of AI in research, which to me suggests, not because I'm a fanatic regulator, but because I think that AI does raise questions also in the field of research, that we need to really start thinking about perhaps some basic principles to use AI in research. And don't misunderstand me. And in fact, I think I came up with positive examples of what AI can bring to research. And no doubt there is huge potential there. But there are also pitfalls. There are also risks in terms of research integrity, in terms of the validity of results in certain disciplines that one could get. So there is, to me, clearly a need to reflect, obviously with all the stakeholders, because it's not an obvious question, on some basic principles which should be adhered to by all. And to me, one obvious one might be the obligation always to disclose. First, that you should always have a human researcher's name on the paper, and the second thing, that you should always disclose to what extent you have used AI and how, in order to arrive at the results that you publish. When it comes now to our responsibilities to manage Horizon Europe and to assess applications, you put a very right question there. Might we not at some point be overtaken by some events, and might we not, because there would be no such disclosure by the applicants, might we not be misled by them? So this is a real issue, and we are thinking how we can on the one side, I wouldn't say tighten up the rules, but clarify at least what we would expect from applicants. And then there is also the capacity to control. And there, probably we are back to what technology can offer us to spot what could hardly come from a human being. Yeah.
Thank you. We are actually running out of time, but if you still can stay a few more minutes for the last question from Ali, that would be perfect.
I'll just come up so everyone can hear. Thank you very much, first of all, for this event. It's lovely to have the Brussels talk back after the pandemic. And thank you, Magda, for laying the groundwork for my question, which is basically, I'm from Boğaziçi University, Turkey's leading university, and we also have the biggest and most known deep tech center in the country, and specializing in health. And my question to you is that under your leadership now that we are moving toward more personalized medicine, how do you plan on facilitating and regulating the developments in the field vis-a-vis ethics, especially with regards to the involvement of AI and the non-EU data data that will be used, personalized data that will be used within the EU, especially with, for example, Horizon Europe projects that will also be generated from the AI.
What a question.
That's a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's,
Thank you so much.
it's about personalized medicine, use of data from outside of the EU, etc., etc. Well, first of all, related to the previous question, I'm in charge under the authority of Executive Vice President Vestager. And secondly, I am not in charge of all regulatory matters which might be relevant for research in the end. But this is one example where whole of government approaches are very much needed to look indeed at the governance around data, how we can facilitate European data spaces, especially for health matters, quite essential. Before thinking of using data from outside of Europe, we should be using the data we have inside of Europe. And you're right to mention data, because data is in fact key for really unleashing the potential of artificial intelligence, notably. So my answer to you, not knowing exactly what the ethical considerations around data coming from outside of Europe might be. It depends how that data is collected, right? But a priori, I don't see why there would be a big ethical dimension to anonymize data coming from outside of Europe, except if it relates, I don't know, to experimentation, which one would never do in Europe, and so on and so forth. But for that, we do have already rules under Horizon Europe, which forbid unethical research, i.e., research which would be forbidden in Europe. So here, my general reply to you would be: yes, we need to get our act together in Europe on creating European data spaces which are favorable to research, which really allow Europe, especially in health, where Europe is also very much in the lead, to allow us to exploit that advantage. And it's not just for international competitiveness. It brings us back to what our stakeholders have brought back to us, which is, well, in an aging society like Europe, we need to focus a lot of our research efforts also on health, and personalized medicine holds many promises from that point of view.
Thank you so much. I have a feeling we need to schedule another Brussels box with you.
You might want to, varier les plaisirs. Someone else.
Well, we are doing it monthly, but I think that the topics that are still there and questions that are still coming is really enough for another hour. But anyway, thanks a lot. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your active participation here in the room, and also thanks to the audience online for being with us. And yeah, we will closely look into the current future, let's say. I mean, the works that are now ongoing as it comes to interim evaluation, this famous expert group that is to be established for the future of the program as well. And we will also not only look at that, but we will also participate actively in those discussions here in Brussels and elsewhere. Thanks a lot once again.